Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at, talking about the new AMD Zambezi, or however you want to really kind of call it. Most of us are probably going to end up calling it Piledriver, but the FX8350. Now, this is a little bit of a complex one. One thing I will say is to go and have a look at all the graphs and all the results and everything. I will be putting the link to the main review on Overclock 3D up as quick as I possibly can. We are kind of like talking about NDA times and stuff like this, so it's kind of difficult sometimes to be able to get the video and the review to match exactly, but I will try my best for you. I also need the video live so I can put it, wait for it to go HD and then paste it into the main review and then put it live. So anyway, right. One thing I will say right from the very start is really did want AMD to do so well with this review, and by that I mean it seems that AMD obviously bought Radeon, but we'll leave the graphics cards out of it, so we won't talk about what I still call ATI. We'll talk about the processor market. It feels like we've not really had anything good to say since the 1090T, and the 1090T, when that first came out, it was the first of the 6-core processors that they'd released, but it was more about the fact that they'd been lagging for a little while really, and the 1090 when that came out was smack bang on the money with the Intel i7-950, and they were very well matched. It's a bit like the 7970 and the 680 now, pretty much identical. There's nothing between them. So the 950 and the 1090 were very much like that, and that was at the time as well when the 1366 socket still had, like, you had all the different overclocking and the bus speeds and everything that you could do, and obviously AMD involves a lot more kind of like tweaking and playing around with the overclocking than like the current generation Intels. The 1090 I had was an amazing chip. I could get a 400 bus out of that at decent volts. It was stable with reasonable cooling at decent volts at 400 times 10, so you had a 400 bus, a 4 gigahertz overclock. It was a brilliant chip. Most of them were doing about 350 and stuff anyway, but it was a really great chip. We gave it an absolute gold award. It was one of the times when it made sense to be thinking to yourself, do I buy Intel or do I save a bit of money? Shall I go and get an AMD 1090? There really wasn't much between the two, and it was a viable option back then where you could think and you didn't know which way to go. Sadly really, AMD don't seem to have done much since. Yeah, okay, we were AM3 socket back then, and we've had the AM3 Plus socket come through. We had the 1100T, which, let's face it, was just a 1090 but with a multiplier notch on it, so it ran a little bit quicker out the box. Really didn't make a lot of difference. I think the 1100Ts, where they were starting to speed the processors up for making them and stuff, I would honestly say that the 1100Ts weren't overclocking as well as the early 1090s. And then we moved into Bulldozer, and everyone, because of the way AMD had stagnated for so long, everyone was saying Bulldozer was going to bulldoze the competition. It was going to be epic. It was going to blow Intel out the water. We were talking about it beating 2600Ks. And it really didn't. It came in, it was so mediocre. At that point in time, I'll be honest with you, and I've never said this live on a video, but basically the Bulldozer chips come out, but they released the board 6 months sooner. Now what happened back then, to give you a little bit of insight into the market and what goes on behind the scenes, all of the vendors, so by vendors I mean MSI, Gigabyte, Asus, all the people that were making the motherboards had the boards ready for the NDA day, or they were well on their way to having them done, and AMD decided to postpone the launch. And it had happened a couple of times previous, but we were so close to it coming out that AMD turned round to the vendors and said, just put the boards out anyway. And then 6 months later, they released the actual processors. People inside AMD will tell you that they did nothing to those processors. They buggered around with them a bit, but essentially they were exactly the same process that they'd been working on the betas on all along. Some people say that they never really changed, you know, enough of it at all, and they were still kind of making the same wafers. But that's all kind of speculation. But the thing is that was a very, very clever marketing plan, because essentially what they did was people went out and bought those 990 FX boards thinking Bulldozer was going to be great, because not through their own doing, but because of the fan base, there was a massive, massive amount of hype around Bulldozer. I know loads of people that went out and bought Bulldozer kit and second-hand 1090Ts and stuff. So they're all 990 FX'd up, all ready for when Bulldozer dropped. So you had that 6 months of sales of the boards, knowing that Bulldozer was coming, and everybody thought it was going to be epic. Bulldozer lands, and it's completely and utterly pants. So people have already invested all this money in their kit. A lot of people pre-ordered Bulldozer thinking it was going to be amazing. Bearing in mind the reviews went live very, very close, if not the day that the products were allowed to be on sale in the shops. All very, very well done in a diary and stuff. So a lot of people had paid good money for stuff before the reviews were even live to find out that the kit wasn't that great. And if you'd paid any attention at that time to eBay, eBay was suddenly flooded with people selling their AMD kit. Prices fell on their arse. You could pick up, you know, Bulldozer stuff and 990 FX stuff for pennies on eBay because there was so much of it. So I think back then they'd done a lot of that marketing very, very cleverly. But the problem is because, you know, people weren't really happy with it, the reviews were bad, everyone was saying the same thing, that they had to cut the prices so drastically. And when they got released, they were 225 quid. I think you know, Bulldozers went down to about 140 in the end. That's GBP, obviously. We're in England. Queen's money, all that kind of stuff. Real currency. That's going to start around. But anyway, so they slashed the prices. I mean, that's a massive, massive drop for a product. But pretty much instantly, the Bulldozer reviews went live, and the reason this is why I've kind of told you this story is because then instantly, all over the reviews, the comments, the forums, everyone's were then talking about Piledriver. So today, we finally get to the Piledriver point. So, thinking to myself, I want it to be a fair test. We've already done 2500k. We've got 2600k results, got 2700k results. We've got 3770k results. We haven't done an i5 3570k yet, so I thought to myself, I'll get one in, and this is why the office is in such a state at the moment. I got a 3570k in. I dropped it into the UP7 board, and I tested that specifically so I'd have some i5 results for Piledriver. Now, many of you are now probably starting to get a little bit itchy in your seat. Probably the AMD boys are going to be thinking, well, why did he have to test an i5? Is it to say that he wanted the i5 results to then show how much better Piledriver was than the i5? Maybe it's better than the 3770k. Maybe we're talking i7s again. Well, no, sadly. I tested the i5 because I was hoping it would come in around this mark, really. And it gets very complicated from this point onwards. There's so many things. Bulldozer had massive heat problems. Now, I'll say this quite early on. Bulldozer did have massive heat problems. Now, the thing with AMD is, you look at the results on load, and it looks like it's 46 degrees when it's overclocked. But the best way I can tell you that I work, now there's no way you could have a processor that was 9 degrees above ambient temperatures, because it's, you know, it reads 9 degrees, so we know it's not going to be able to be running below ambient. So the way I look at it is it's above ambient. So if your room's at like 22 degrees and it says 9 degrees, it's like it's 31 degrees. That's the way I think of it in my head. It's the only logical, real way of thinking it. Or maybe it's the temperature above the motherboard temperature. It doesn't really matter. It has to be above something, because you could never have that processor running below what the ambient temperature was in the room without some kind of freaky cooling or some kind of trolling master with a H100 with 40 fans and a modified version of their own temperature reading software. Ba-dum-dum. So, the temperatures, I will admit, they are much better than they were before. When I overclocked Bulldozer, I had to have an NHD14 with 220 CFM Delta fans on it, just to make it feel like the heatsink on the cooler wasn't going to melt. With the standard Noctua fans at 12 volts, the cooler was warm to the touch, where if you put your hand on it, you'd take your hand off quickly because you'd be like, what? I'm used to an NHD14 feeling cold. No, both towers were properly warm, like above body temperature warm. It was unreal. With this, I will say, definitely a step in the right direction. It's much better. H100 with a pretty hefty overclock, which we'll talk about, but with a pretty hefty overclock, it was reading 46. So if we'll say it was 22 degrees in the room, you're looking at about 68 to maybe 70 degrees Celsius. So you've got decent cooling and still with a good overclock. Now, right, we'll talk about overclock and then we'll start going to performance and stuff like that. With the AMD, you do have a few different things that you have to overclock. Now, if any of you out there are looking to go down your overclocking journey, I personally would be saying, if you're an absolute beginner and you just want to do it for fun, as in you're not going to end up having this rig for, you know, like a main rig or anything like that. It's just something to spend a little bit of money on and learn how to overclock. I would be telling any of you out there to get yourself either a 1366 rig with something like a 950 or even a 970 if you can pick them up cheap enough. But you don't really need those 6 cores. You can happily go with a 950, or getting a board like this 990 FX UD7 from Gigabyte, and then trying to pick yourself up a 1090T cheap, because you've got many things that you have to look. When you adjust the bus speed on them, obviously the memory goes out, but at the same time with AMD, you've got the HT speed to think of, you've got the Northbridge CPU Northbridge speed. Do you know what I mean? There's all kind of loads of other things that you have to kind of take into thought, and it's basically about finding the best way out around it. Now, what I generally do with the AMDs is I start with trying to increase the bus. I drop the multiplier right back down. I drop the other speeds back as well, just by changing the little notches in them, so taking the multipliers back, and I work on the bus speed. So you can be running, say for argument's sake, if you got to a 400 bus, you may only have it on a like a 2 multiplier or something, so it's not actually running that quick. So we drop this right back, and the most I managed to get out of this, bearing in mind, like I said before, I know it's different architecture, my record with 1090 stable was 400 bus. I would kind of normally expect kind of like 300. I think we got 300 with Bulldozer, and then with like the average 1100T, you'd be maybe looking at the 350 mark. We only just managed to get this to 275, and that really was at the tail end of the overclocking ability on that bus speed with it. But when you go through all the other phases, like trying to find out how fast this will go, how fast that will go, what you end up coming to is you end up trying to get to a point where you're balancing all these out. So you get the maximum amount of performance. So you're trying to balance an increased bus speed with a decent multiplier, and then a decent HT speed, and then a decent this. And you have to try and get the best out of it. But the problem was, when you started to play with the multiplier on this, as in started to move that multiplier upwards, it was really held back, and it didn't like that bus speed being played with at all. Now, Intel, the AMD fanboy is going to say, well, you can't do it with Intel anymore. Well, the Intels are designed to be left at 100. You don't change the bus speed on the Intel boards unless you're just looking for, you know, like the final few points in a benchmark. There's no point touching it on a day-to-day basis. You can only normally get 3 out of them at the very most anyway. 2011s can be slightly different, but even then I don't generally bother moving the bus speed on the 2011s at all either. So yes, the AMD fanboys are right, the Intels can't, but they're not designed to be done that way either. With this, the ability is there. As soon as you start to kind of move that multiplier up, the CPU really didn't like that bus speed being played with at all, to the point where I got so fed up with, you know, moving it up a notch, having to knock the bus speed back again, going up another notch with the multiplier, having to drop the bus speed back again. I ended up going right the way back to the standard 200 bus just to be able to get, you know, up further. And to put this into context, my maximum overclock that I managed to get on this was 5.2 gigahertz. Stable running for benchmarks and stuff like that was 4.8. Now, if I dropped it back to 4.4 gigahertz and moved the bus speed from 200 to 205, it was not stable anymore at all. So it really doesn't like much, done on that bus at all. Now, again, I know the AMD fans out there are going, what? 5.2 gigahertz and the temps weren't that bad. It was stable at 4.8 and the temps weren't that bad. But if you got Bulldozer to 4.8, generally it was like you were sat beside a nuclear reactor, to the point where, well, they were daft. They put out so much heat, it was unbelievable, and that's because of the power draw. Now, this brings us on to lots of other kind of little different avenues. So I now need to remember to talk to you about overclock performance, and I also need to talk to you about power draw. So overclocked performance. Now, there's a lot to go through on this, and it's a waste of time me showing you all loads of graphs and stuff, because we can just get it out through words. If you want to see graphs, go to the main review underneath. Now, for things like 3D Mark, now a lot of people will say these are so heavily weighted for this and so heavily weighted for that, but when the 1090T was released and it was keeping up with all the Intel stuff, you didn't moan about those benchmarks then. So you can't pick and choose when a benchmark is good. Oh, it's running really well in this benchmark today. Yes, we're going to shout about it. No, it's not working very well in this benchmark today. No, we'll just say it's designed for an Intel processor. No, sorry, you can't be doing that. These programs have been about for a long time now. Surely it's up to the CPU manufacturers to at least make sure that the microcode inside them works with most things. Or at least they send that microcode out to the benchmark people and they do updates. We're on the very latest updates, but like I said previously, the 1090 was absolutely level pegging. The 1090 was absolutely level pegging with the 950 and the same benchmarks a few moons ago. So we're going to use them for results now. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit scary. For 3D Mark results, that's both 11 and Vantage, a stock 3570K was better performance with exactly the same GPU, which was a 7970 running at stock, was better performance than a 4.8 gigahertz overclocked Piledriver CPU. And I do mean, it wasn't a massive amount in it, but it was there. If you run them stock for stock, then the 570K absolutely arse raped the AMD. If you match them core speed for core speed, because there's many of you out there that don't understand that if you have one CPU running at 4.8 gigahertz, that doesn't mean that a different CPU running at the same core speed is going to be the same speed. It's not all about that all important, gigahertz speed. It actually does come down a lot to the architecture within the CPUs as well. So it doesn't matter if you've got a 4-core Intel 950 running at 4 gigahertz, it's not going to be as quick as a 4-core 2500K running at 4 gigahertz. It doesn't work like that. It's the same with the AMDs. Just because an AMD is running at 4 gigahertz doesn't mean it's as quick as an Intel processor running at 4 gigahertz. Now, with the 3570K and then a Bulldozer, then a Piledriver, both running at 4.8, the Intel one absolutely gets up and walks off with the prize, and I mean absolutely annihilates the Piledriver. Now this does start to become a problem when at stock the whole rig with a 3570K in, so 8 gigabytes of memory, same solid state drive, same power supply, same graphics card, same cooling. With the CPU maxed out, that rig was pulling 127 watts from the wall. That's it. 127 watts. If you overclock the CPU to 4.8 gigahertz and run the same test again, it was running at about 170 watts from the wall. So less than 200 watts. If you mix the CPU in with it, mix the GPU in with it, you're looking at just over 300 watts total pull from the wall. Just to let you know these kind of numbers. So when you see someone on the forums with a 3770K or 3570K, a 680 a solid state drive and a H100 with a 1000 watt power supply, you can quite literally tell them they've got a power supply that's twice the power than they really need, which is why I keep telling everybody you don't need these enormous power supplies. And you would have to be a complete airhead to tell someone that they'd need a 1200 watt power supply when really their rig is probably pulling something more along the lines of 300 or 400 watts. It really isn't the point. And your PSUs don't even run that efficiently when they're being used so litterly. The rig I sit beside daily with kind of a similar kind of 2011 7970, that kind of setup, I've got a 650 watt power supply in that rig, and the fan hardly spins up because it hardly ever touches it. The only time I really see that fan spin up is when I'm running renders. Every time it's just sat there idle. But anyway, so we get to the kind of Bulldozer side of things. A Bulldozer stock CPU draws more power than an overclocked 3570K CPU, which is a tiny little bit nuts. If we kind of go into the overclock settings, it will then pull more power than the 3570 and the GPU. And if you overclock it all and run it all together, you're then looking at 24% more power draw than the Intel rig. It's a massive amount. Now, while we're talking about performance, recently I went to a like a seminar thing for an AMD event in London. Press get invited, we get early looks. It was when we first got told about Trinity, and then they started talking about Piledriver, as in the FX stuff as well. And I knew from that point we weren't going to be getting very big scores out of this, because the problem is they were kind of comparing it to the results with like lower end i5 units. They weren't talking about power draw at all. They were just saying it's cooler. They wouldn't talk about the amount of power it was actually pulling from the wall. They really didn't have a lot to say about it. And they kept saying about, oh, it's going to be better for game and it's better for this. Well, we've used an AMD graphics card on purpose with this review, hoping that the two kind of matched together. It would be like some weird superhero kind of like power up thing, and they'd kind of see each other, have kind of like silicon babies behind the scenes and pump out scores that we've never seen before. Sadly, they were all kind of like mystical dreams in the back of my head, and none of that ever really happened. But we tried our absolute utmost for this. I mean, you can see the state of the rig beside me. This is what I ended up benching on. It looks a state, but it's because essentially what we did is we built it an entirely brand new rig. It may not look like much, but it's pretty functional. We've got, you know, a 240 gigabyte SATA 6 solid state drive in there, which we've put a brand new installer Windows on it. We've optimized everything we possibly could. It's all the latest drivers. It's all the latest benchmarks. You know what I mean? We've got really nice cooling on it. We couldn't, you know, we were prepared for this. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, we were ready for the worst, but at the same time, what we were trying to do is minimize the negative factor behind it. And I can honestly say that after putting all of this work in, it's kind of only really left me with one thing that I'm now starting to get quite worried about. And by worried about this, what I'm actually worried about is you lot out there. I don't give a monkey's whether this really performs that well for me personally, because I'm here to try and teach you guys and educate you guys and give you an insight into what's going on and try and make sure that you put your money in the right pots. And the way this stands now is, if you've got an AMD kit already, then and you're looking for a new CPU, then this really is as good as it's going to get. So you may be worth spending the 150 quid, chucking it in your rig, and then you've got a bit of a performance bump. But if you've got an entirely new system, then there's no way on this earth you should even be considering buying an AMD product. And that's a really, really worrying thing for the market. We need AMD to sort their shit out. Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether they need to change the coffee in the vending machines, whether they need to be a bit nicer to their staff, or maybe they need to be a bit stricter with their staff. Maybe they need to start investing in kids that are in university or something like that. I don't know. But something has got to change with AMD drastically, because at the moment, as far as the enthusiast market is concerned, and by the enthusiast market, I'm talking about you people that are watching this video now, that have come here specifically to watch this, there isn't really any competition for Intel, and that's really, really bad for us. When the last time we had a massive performance leap, which was from really effectively, I would say, from 1156 going into 1155, I don't think AMD have really spent much money even bothering to try and get this sorted out, because Intel is so far in front with their technology now. But at the same time, I'm also very much aware of how much Intel have slowed down their product releases, and things are getting put back and things are getting left longer in the market between changes. You may think they're changing their sockets a lot, but believe you me, they're not. It's a lot slowed down from the things we were talking about 18 months, 2 years ago, trust me. And this is it's a really, really worrying thing, because what we want is a good, healthy amount of competition to drive the market forward, drive money into research and development, to keep our hobby, our passion, and our love of this computer industry, you know, going forward. And when you've got AMD and they can't even produce an 8-core processor to keep up with a corresponding Intel 4-core processor, even though the core speed's higher, and they've done this and they've done that, it's a really, really worrying thing. So essentially, we are still at it's 2 AMD cores per Intel core. Now, some of you out there will start saying on about its modules and it's really only a 4-core split into 2, but there are 8 cores on there. Now, this is the other thing that really worries me at the moment, is AMD's Trinity. Trinity is awesome. It is good. The APU stuff that they're doing is brilliant, and that is their product that does really work and kick Intel to touch. It's probably the main reason why they bought Radeon in the first place, is because they knew, you know, somewhere along the lines they needed to start getting decent dedicated kind of graphics onto the same core so that they can start churning stuff out. And the software is starting to come through now, where like to be able to use those processing threads of a GPU, which is obviously loads and loads of little cores, really kind of works well with it. And they have got at least one product out in the market that's better than Intel, but it's much, much lower in the market. And the thing that I'm worried about is that AMD are going to forget. We've got down here, we've got like the basic Trinity, great little home theatre PC, very basic gaming, but by basic gaming I'm talking about like kids and your missus kind of gaming. Any kind of serious gamer is going to want more grunt than an APU. But like what I would call a great kind of normal kind of usage PC is going to be low power, still got that GPU in it, so it can take advantage of everything that we can offload stuff onto the graphics. So that's down here, nice and low in the market, at the bottom of the screen. But most of us, as soon as you start adding that dedicated graphics in, we kind of come up to this point. We want something with a bit more grunt. And this is kind of the point where I would put, or we'll put it over here, this is kind of the point where I would put like Bulldozer and Piledriver and the 3570K. Forget the 2011 stuff, because that's just completely out of the reach of most people and completely out of the reach of AMD anyway. So we've got this part of the market here. Now, this is just a personal fear of mine, so these are my thoughts. I think now AMD are just humouring the AM3 socket. And I do think that with Piledriver and stuff, they've not really spent a lot of money on it. They've not really bothered. It was only a year ago they released Bulldozer, but yeah, a year later we're back with another CPU. Not really done anything. It's not setting the world on fire. They may as well have just put another multiplier notch on it or something. Yes, it runs a little bit cooler. Yes, we can get slightly better overclocks out of it 24/7. One thing we have noticed is that the memory performance is much lower. I could not get this running at 1866 for love nor money. And while we're talking about that, a lot of people say Bulldozer, or sorry, Piledriver, it's meant for rendering and stuff like that. But the problem is with the really high-end maths calculation stuff, like properly intense CPU and like memory bandwidth hogging applications. Basically, you've got those 8 cores, which very few programs see, but the ones that see it then want another lovely big fat pipe. So we've got 8 cores, and then need a lovely big fat pipe of memory bandwidth to chuck all the data from these 8 cores down. So it's almost like having 8 people at the top of a tunnel, and then they want to start chucking balls down a tunnel, and they basically need a nice wide tunnel so they can chuck loads and loads of balls down it. The trouble is, where we can only get 1600 megahertz out of it, it's like they've got a much smaller tunnel to try and get stuff down, so they can't get as much stuff down it. And that's the kind of bottlenecking effect that only being able to get 1600 megahertz memory has out of these 8 cores. It's beyond disappointing in this day and age. It's bloody ridiculous. So we've got that anyway. But back to the kind of like humouring point of the AMD with the AM3 socket. People like the AMD fanboys, or whatever you want to call yourselves, they're always going to be saying the next thing's going to be great, the next thing's going to be great, the next thing's going to be great. If, and this is a big if we ever get a socket that's not AM3 and they change it to go up a notch, because this socket does need changing now, has to be the socket holding this thing back. We know the architecture's not great, but we know things are going to be needing to move along. We don't know, but we may even get another CPU out of this yet, but I certainly don't see it blowing the world alight. If they ever change the socket for the enthusiast market, and it's the same kind of story that we've had with Bulldozer and Piledriver, I will go as far as to say you may as well kiss AMD goodbye from the enthusiast end of the market. And I think they will slowly start to pull themselves back and end up just putting all their money into APUs. We are at quite a critical point in the market at this present moment in time, because AMD are doing so badly in the enthusiast end. I know how much of a kick in the teeth they took and the amount of money that they lost from Bulldozer not being as good. Piledriver is the same story. It's had a bit of spit and polish. They fixed a couple of things, but they've not really done them well enough. The other things that they've not really addressed should have been done as well. They've made some things worse. I had 2133 megahertz out of Bulldozer chip. This, I can only get the memory up to 1600, and I spent a long time trying to get it to run 1866 to the point where I was going nuts. I'd kind of got people online that I know are like properly like mega into their AMD overclocking, and I'm like, boys, I can't even get this thing running 1866. Somebody please tell me I'm a complete retard. Please tell me where I'm going wrong. And they're like, oh yeah, you just need to do this. Yeah, I've done that and it's not doing it. Yeah, well, what about if you put it up to this? No, not even still doing it. What about if you do this? No, now it's blue screening. Literally, there was one evening we were here for about 4 hours. I was with 2 people online trying to get this thing running at 1866, and it did my basket in, to the point where we eventually went, nah, fuck it, we're just going to leave it at 1600 megahertz. So I know this video has been a lot about me chatting pretty much the same kind of things that I said with Bulldozer, but I am really worried, and it's because I want AMD to do well. I want them to give Intel some competition in the higher end of the market, because it feels like, for me personally, it feels like AMD is just humouring people that have got this kit now, because it's not a viable upgrade option anymore. If you've got AMD kit, then you know it's real shit, but this is all that you've really got to choose from, because you can't go anywhere from this. But if you spent the same amount of money on an Intel kit, so you bought the board, you bought the 3570K, you bought the cooling and everything, what options have you got to go with afterwards? Say for argument's sake you buy the 1600 megahertz memory for an Ivy bridge, then you've got 1866, 2133, 2400, 2666 memory that you can drop in there, and you'll know that pretty much every processor on the planet will be able to doing it if you know the way around the BIOS. 6 months down the line, your mate's selling a 3770K cheap. Oh right, I can upgrade it to that. So you've got a processor upgrade that you can do there as well. You've got loads of kind of like, there's so many different boards to choose from. You've got better options with your cooling, because I've seen lots more manufacturers now not even bothering to put AMD stuff on their coolers. The Corsair H100, what does it come shipped with? An Intel mounting bracket. You have to take the whole thing apart to put a bloody AMD bracket on it. And even then it's just 2 pins to hold on to things. There's no dedicated bracket for it, because you know not many people are going to be bothering to buy them anymore. So there's lots of these little things where it's just like, you just go Intel. You just go Intel. And I don't care whether you think I'm a fanboy or not, because I really don't care. If AMD bring out a processor that literally you don't even need a cooler on it, it runs at 5 gigahertz, it's 3 times as fast as an Intel board, I will be running that processor quicker than you can get a condom on when you're just about to shag Carmen Electra. Honest to God, I would be, bam, I'm on AMD again. Woohoo! We've got some competition out there. I just don't see it's going to happen. I just really don't. And sorry if it looks like I've gone all flustered, it's because I'm thinking about Carmen Electra. But anyway guys, Piledriver, the recap of it is, should you be buying it? No. If you're looking to build yourself an entirely new system, you need to dodge this like it's the bubonic plague. It's really not worth bothering with, and I don't care whether you are rendering videos, photoshopping, gaming, anything. It's really not worth bothering with. It's going to draw more power. You're locked in. I mean, this is as good as it gets. You're locked into this. You've got no upgrade options really. It's not a viable, it's not a viable option for anyone. The only time when I would say maybe buy it is if you've already got like a, maybe a 1090T or something, or even a Bulldozer really. There's a little bit of performance gain there to be had. But in all honesty, unless you're absolutely properly strapped for cash and you can only afford to buy that CPU as an upgrade, I will still be stood here in 6 months' time telling you to just sell your rig and get yourself something Intel. And it is a really sad thing, because I am a proper lover of the AMD graphics. They're brilliant. I love the 7970. I've got them on my bench rig, I've got them in my main rig, I'm putting them in Orca. Says the world about what I think of their graphics. But the processors just don't cut the mustard with them at all. So I'm going to leave that with that, because how long have we been going for? 37 minutes. I've not broken off, and that was all done with one take. And I don't even know what the time is. I should show you. Let's have a look. I'll show you what the time is, because there we go. Look. Now the NDA is in 4 hours and 20 minutes, and I've put this review off this long because I've been trying to get all my thoughts ready and out, and you've kind of just got a splurge, and I do apologise that it's all been mixed up and stuff, but as you know with my reviews, I do end up going on tangents to try and bring points over a bit better. Hopefully I've done that. Congratulations if you got from the start to the beginning, the start to the end. I'm now going to get this video rendered for you straight away, so you do have it in time for NDA. I just wish it was nice and news. But for now at least, with the AMD FX8350 processor, this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you. Out. Ding!